The stars hung like glittering diamonds in the cold vastness of space, but the Raven's Mercy felt more like a shadow than a ship, its sleek form cutting through the blackness with barely a whisper. Inside, the air was thick with tension. The hum of the engines was the only sound in the command deck, where Commander Rhea Talon stood, eyes locked on the display. The ghostly signal had come from the heart of the Andromeda expanse, a place even the bravest explorers avoided. "You're sure this is legitimate, Captain?" Talon's voice cut through the silence, smooth but sharp. Captain Vance, an old friend and seasoned navigator, glanced back at her, his brow furrowing. "It's real, Commander. The Leviathan, the ship the UESS lost 100 years ago, has just broadcasted a beacon, a repeating signal. And it's human." Talon narrowed her eyes. The UESS Leviathan had vanished with all hands aboard, leaving no trace, no explanation. Official reports said it was a tragic loss, a failed expedition into unknown space. That was until now. "How long has it been transmitting?" Talon asked. "Just under 2 hours," Vance replied, his fingers dancing across the console as he zoomed in on the coordinates. "We're within range. It'll take another 2 days to reach it." Her gaze moved over to Lieutenant Marquez, who sat at the operations station, her focus unbroken as she sifted through incoming data. The young officer was no stranger to danger, but even she couldn't mask the spark of curiosity that flickered in her eyes. "We're entering unexplored territory," Kess said, breaking her silence. "This could change everything. It might even rewrite history." Talon glanced at the woman, her expression unreadable. "History's already been written. We're just here to see how the chapters end." The silence returned as the crew gathered their gear, the weight of the mission settling in. A century of uncertainty was about to collapse into something solid, something real. There was something deeply unsettling about the whole situation, a gnawing feeling that this wouldn't be a simple rescue or discovery. As the Raven's Mercy cruised deeper into the expanse, the stars began to blur, their light swallowed by a vast, creeping fog of dark matter. The gravitational forces of the region distorted space, creating ripples in the fabric of time itself. The signal was almost a whisper now, as if the Leviathan was calling them from a distance beyond comprehension. "Approaching the coordinates," Vance said, his voice calm but his knuckles white on the navigation console. Talon walked over to the forward viewport, her boots echoing softly on the metal floor. Beyond the glass, the universe unfolded like a painting, the swirling nebula and distant stars only deepening the vast isolation. There was no telling what they would find. A small blip flickered on the radar, barely noticeable at first. A speck of light. But it grew, faster than any ship should, its movements precise, unnatural. Talon's breath caught in her throat. "There it is," Kess said, her voice a mix of awe and trepidation. "The Leviathan. She's alive." Talon nodded, her pulse quickening. She couldn't shake the feeling that the ship wasn't just lost in time. It had been waiting. For them. "We have to know what happened," Talon murmured. Her voice was firm, but even she couldn't hide the edge of uncertainty creeping into her tone. With a final, deep breath, she turned to face the crew. They were about to make first contact with humanity's greatest mystery, and the galaxy's deadliest secret. The air on the Leviathan was heavy, thick with the scent of dust and forgotten years. The ship, once a proud titan of Earth's interstellar fleet, now felt more like a crypt. The dim lights flickered erratically, casting long, jittery shadows on the metal walls. But there was movement, too much for a ship that had been presumed abandoned for a century. Commander Rhea Talon led her team through the darkened halls, her boots echoing softly against the silent floor. Behind her, the crew moved cautiously, weapons at the ready, eyes scanning every corner. The Leviathan's corridors were eerily quiet, yet the hum of machinery beneath the surface hinted that it was far from empty. "This place, it feels wrong," murmured Lieutenant Marquez, her voice low and uneasy as she glanced around. The flickering lights made the ship seem like it was trapped in time, suspended in a half-life between past and present. Talon didn't respond. Her eyes were fixed ahead, focused on the dimly lit control room up ahead. It was there, in the heart of the Leviathan, where they might find the answers, or more questions. They reached the door. Talon pushed it open, the creaking hinges protesting against the silence. Inside, the room was as cold and sterile as the rest of the ship, but there was something different here. The console was active, blinking with faint, pulsating lights. Someone, or something, had been here recently. Running diagnostics, Kes muttered, stepping forward to the console. Her fingers moved with practiced speed, hacking into the systems to gather any useful data. The screen flashed to life with a series of numbers and graphs, too fast for anyone to comprehend. But then, one line stood out. "Wait, there's someone still on board," Kes said, her voice sharp with disbelief. "At least one." Before Talon could respond, the doors slid open behind them. A figure stepped into the room, moving with an eerie, fluid grace. Tall, unshaven, with eyes that gleamed unnaturally bright in the dim light. He wore the worn, torn uniform of a Leviathan crew member, yet there was something about him that felt wrong. Talon's hand instinctively went to her sidearm, but she didn't draw it. Not yet. She studied the man carefully, sensing an unusual energy emanating from him. He didn't move like a survivor. He moved like someone who had changed. "Who are you?" Talon demanded, her voice firm, but not unkind. The man smiled, but there was nothing comforting in the expression. It was a smile of recognition, as if he had been waiting for them. "The Leviathan, the architects. We were chosen," he said, his voice soft but filled with strange authority. "And now, we wait for the others to arrive." Talon frowned, a sense of dread creeping up her spine. "Chosen?" "The architects." Her mind raced to the last reports on the Leviathan, the lost crew, the mysterious disappearance, the rumors of alien technology. But this was something new, something she wasn't prepared for. "Where are the others?" Kes asked, her eyes scanning the room for any signs of a larger presence. The man tilted his head, his smile fading into something more unsettling. "They're here, inside, waiting, watching." Before Talon could ask more, another figure stepped from the shadows. Another crew member, but this one looked different. Her skin shimmered faintly, her eyes glowing faintly with an unnatural light. There was an air of calm power about her, but her presence was overwhelmingly alien. "Your arrival is expected," the woman said, her voice soft, almost hypnotic. "And you have come at the right time. Humanity's greatest leap is about to begin." Talon felt a chill crawl up her spine. Whatever this ship had become, it was no longer just a vessel. It had become something else entirely. The air on the Leviathan grew heavier with every passing minute, as if the ship itself was holding its breath. Commander Talon stood at the center of the control room, her gaze fixed on the woman who had just spoken. Dr. Amira Voss, the former scientist, and now something else, something beyond what human understanding could grasp. Talon's heart raced, but she kept her composure. "What do you mean? Humanity's greatest leap? What has happened to this ship's crew?" she demanded, her voice sharp, cutting through the tension in the room. Dr. Voss's smile didn't falter. She took a step forward, her skin glowing faintly in the dim light, her eyes bright, almost luminous. "We were chosen. The Leviathan was not lost. It was redirected. The architects." "Enough with the architects." Talon snapped, her patience wearing thin. "I've heard enough of this nonsense. You've been altered, changed, by something. What happened to the crew?" Dr. Voss's expression softened, but her eyes held a strange, almost pitying look. "You're misunderstanding, Commander. The Leviathan was never lost. It was found by the architects, who saw the potential in us, in humanity. They didn't abduct us. They elevated us." A cold shiver ran down Talon's spine. Elevated? She asked, her tone bitter with disbelief. You're telling me the Leviathan just disappeared for a century and came back with evolved crew members? Yes, Dr. Voss answered, her voice calm and unwavering. We're no longer merely human. We've ascended. Talon's thoughts raced. She exchanged a quick glance with Kess, who stood by the console, her face pale with a mix of confusion and curiosity. Talon felt the ground shift beneath her. This wasn't just about missing people or a lost ship. This was something far bigger, something dangerous. She pressed further, trying to maintain control. And what about the Exareth? The Dominion? They seemed to know more than they're letting on. They'd been hunting this ship for decades. Dr. Voss's expression darkened. The Dominion doesn't understand. They think the Leviathan is a weapon. They want to control what they can't comprehend. But they've always underestimated us. They think they're the ones in power, but they haven't seen what we've become. Her voice dropped to a whisper, but there was a hint of warning. We're no longer bound by the same rules, Commander. The Leviathan is just the beginning. Soon, there will be more. Hundreds of ships, each carrying humanity's true potential. Talon's pulse quickened. Her mind raced to grasp the full scope of what was unfolding. The crew of the Leviathan had undergone something that went far beyond a scientific breakthrough. This wasn't just genetic alteration. It was a transformation into something otherworldly. The architects had reprogrammed humanity, twisted it into a new form, and the ship's return wasn't just a chance for discovery. It was the beginning of a new era. Where are the others? Talon asked, her voice tight with urgency. Where's the rest of the crew? Dr. Voss smiled, but it wasn't the warm, welcoming smile from before. It was colder. They're here, waiting. The Leviathan is the first, but it won't be the last. The architects have seen to that. A chill gripped Talon's heart as she realized the full magnitude of what she was facing. This wasn't just a mission gone wrong. This was the start of something far larger, and humanity, for better or worse, was no longer the species it once was. The room fell silent. Talon's mind raced. The stakes had changed. The Leviathan's return wasn't just the key to unlocking the secrets of the universe. It was a ticking time bomb. And Earth had no idea what it was about to unleash. The walls of the Leviathan seemed to pulse with life, the quiet hum of the ship now accompanied by a strange, almost musical undertone. It wasn't the usual sound of machinery. It was something more, as if the ship itself had become an organism, breathing, thinking, waiting. Commander Talon stood in the ship's central command hub, her arms crossed tightly as she stared at the vast display before her. Data streamed across the screen in chaotic bursts, lines of code flashing faster than she could process. But it wasn't the numbers that held her attention. It was the subtle, almost imperceptible changes she was seeing in her crew. Lieutenant Kess had been the first to show signs. At first, it was subtle, a quickening of her reflexes, a sharpness to her focus that had always been there, but now it was honed, amplified. It was as though the ship's presence was shaping them, altering them in ways they hadn't even begun to understand. Commander, Kess's voice broke through her thoughts, steady but tense. I've found something. Talon turned sharply, her eyes narrowing as Kess gestured toward a new set of readings on the console. The data was incomprehensible, coded in a language that didn't match anything they'd ever seen. But there was one thing that stood out. The ship's biometric systems were tracking something, human DNA, with noticeable spikes in certain genetic markers. Markers that weren't present before the crew boarded the ship. What am I looking at, Lieutenant? Talon asked, her tone low, almost too quiet. Kess's fingers danced over the console, zooming in on a specific segment of data. The crew, they're changing. It's not just genetic alteration. It's something more, something deeper. Talon frowned, stepping closer to get a better look. Explain. Kess hesitated. The alterations, they're evolving. The genetic markers are off the charts, and they're increasing with each hour. It's like the ship is feeding them, improving them. Talon took a sharp breath. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture was too terrifying to comprehend. They were no longer just passengers on a lost ship. The Leviathan had become a catalyst, an instrument for a transformation far beyond human understanding. And it wasn't just the crew. The ship itself was alive, and it was changing everything it touched. "That's not possible," Talon muttered under her breath. Her mind spun as she tried to process the implications. Could this be the work of the architects? Were they using the Leviathan as a laboratory? Or worse, a weapon? Kess's voice brought her back to the present. "Commander, there's more." Talon turned, her gaze hardening. "What is it?" Kess stepped away from the console, her face pale. "It's not just the crew. I've scanned the entire ship. The Leviathan is evolving too. The AI systems are starting to act independently. It's as if it's learning, becoming something more." Talon felt a chill crawl down her spine. The ship, alive and changing. The crew, unknowingly undergoing a transformation. What was it about this ship that had triggered such a monumental shift? What had the architects seen in humanity to make them alter it in this way? Before she could respond, a sudden crackle from the comms interrupted her thoughts. A transmission came through, static at first, then a voice. "Commander Talon, this is Captain Vance. We've got something moving on the lower decks. Something alive." Talon's eyes snapped to Kess. The chill in her gut deepened. They were no longer dealing with just an abandoned ship. They were facing something far darker, something alive, and it had already begun its awakening. "We're not alone," Talon whispered, her hand instinctively reaching for her sidearm. "Not anymore." The lights flickered again, but this time it wasn't just the power struggling to stabilize. It felt like the Leviathan itself was pulsing, alive, its systems thrumming with energy, responding to something new. The crew felt it too. There was an unease that hung in the air, thick and suffocating, as if the ship were holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Something had already begun. Commander Talon didn't need to look at the data to know it. She could feel it, deep in her bones, a shift in the atmosphere of the ship. The walls seemed to hum with a strange resonance, vibrating with a quiet urgency. Her team had gathered at the central hub, where the control panel still flashed with unreadable data. The silence between them was heavy, broken only by the soft hiss of the air recyclers. "Any sign of what's moving on the lower decks, Captain?" Talon's voice was steady, but there was an edge to it, an urgency she hadn't felt in years. The crew was on edge, and she could see the unease on their faces, mirrored in the eyes of Lieutenant Kess and the rest of the team. Captain Vance stood beside her, his face grim, hands tightly gripping his communicator. "No visuals yet, but there's something alive down there. It's not human, not like us. We've got movement, and it's too organized for it to be a random anomaly." Talon's heart beat harder in her chest. There was a kind of clarity in Vance's words, a certainty that chilled her to the core. The ship wasn't just a vessel anymore. It had become something else, something that was capable of producing life, or maybe controlling it. "Stay close," Talon ordered, her voice commanding, her eyes scanning the team. "We'll head down there together. Prepare for anything." She took a breath, trying to steady herself. What could have been hiding on the lower decks for all these years? And why was it just now stirring to life? They moved quickly, the team following her down a narrow hallway that seemed to stretch on forever. The air grew colder as they descended, the temperature dropping at a noticeable rate. The dim lights cast long shadows on the walls, and every footstep seemed to echo louder than it should have. The further they went, the more the sensation of watching eyes crept over them, as though the ship itself were alive, aware of their every move. A sudden sound pierced the silence. Footsteps, slow, deliberate, and far too rhythmic to be human. Talon froze, holding up a hand to signal the team. She stepped forward cautiously, every sense on high alert. The footsteps grew louder, closer, until the crew reached the final hatch. Talon motioned for the team to take positions on either side. The door slid open with a hiss, and they stepped into the chamber beyond. It was a large, open space, once a cargo bay, now a sprawling, empty void. But there, in the center of the room, stood something that didn't belong. It was humanoid, but not human, not in the way they knew. Its skin shimmered like liquid silver, translucent veins pulsing beneath its surface. Its eyes glowed with an unnatural light, a flickering, shifting energy that seemed to burn through the shadows. The creature didn't move at first, but its presence filled the room with an undeniable, oppressive power. "Not human," Kess whispered, her voice barely audible. "No," Talon murmured, her hand instinctively going to her sidearm, though she didn't draw it yet. "It's something else." The creature's head tilted slowly, as if studying them, and then, with an eerie calmness, it spoke. "You're late," it said, its voice smooth and chilling. "The architects have waited. Humanity's time is near." Talon's stomach dropped. The creature's words weren't just a statement. They were a warning. The room felt colder still as the creature's eyes locked on Talon's, as though it could see into her very soul. The ship had awakened, and so had its mysteries. The air was thick with tension as the creature's words hung in the chamber, reverberating through the walls. Talon's hand tightened around her sidearm, though she hadn't drawn it yet. Her heart hammered in her chest, each beat a warning, each pulse a reminder that nothing was as it seemed. The being before them wasn't just another survivor of the Leviathan. It was something else, something far more dangerous, a creation of the architects, perhaps. The creature, tall, with a body like liquid metal, its form shifting ever so slightly as though it wasn't fully anchored in reality, took a step forward. The sound was eerily quiet, like the softest of whispers against the cold metal floor. "You should not be here," it said, its voice as smooth as velvet, but beneath the calm lay a quiet threat. "The architects did not prepare you, but you have come anyway." Talon stood her ground, every muscle in her body tense, ready to spring into action at a moment's notice. Behind her, the rest of the crew was silent, their eyes wide with disbelief, their hands hovering over weapons, but not yet making a move. "You're not human," Kess said, her voice small but firm, though her words were filled with awe and fear. The creature's glowing eyes flicked to her, assessing, calculating. "No," it replied simply, "but neither are you anymore." Talon narrowed her eyes. She had seen enough of the data to know that the ship's crew had been altered, but hearing it from the creature's lips made the reality of it settle in her gut like a stone. They had all been changed, transformed by something beyond their comprehension. And this being before them, this creation, was proof of just how far humanity had been taken. "Why are you here?" Talon asked, her voice steady, though every instinct screamed at her to retreat. She couldn't afford to show weakness. Not now. "What do you want with us?" The creature tilted its head, the glowing light in its eyes pulsing like distant stars. "I do not want anything. But the architects, they need you. They have waited for so long, and now you are here." The words resonated in the air like a thunderclap, sending a shiver down Talon's spine. The architects, whoever they were, whatever they had done to this ship and its crew, it was clear that they had plans that went far beyond just humanity. This was something else entirely. "You speak as if humanity is part of some grand design," Talon said, taking a step forward, her voice unwavering. "What is this design? What do you want us to do?" The creature's gaze shifted from Talon to the others, and then back again, its expression unreadable. "What you do is unimportant. What matters is when you do it. When the time is right, when the architect's plan reaches its completion, you will understand. You will serve." "Serve who?" Kess blurted, her voice filled with frustration. "The architects. Who are they?" The creature's eyes flickered with something like amusement, but it said nothing. Instead, It took another step closer, its form rippling with a strange fluidity. Talon felt the hairs on the back of her neck rise as a cold draft swept through the chamber, carrying with it the scent of something alien, something foreign, something that wasn't from Earth. "You will learn soon enough," it murmured. "And when you do, it will be too late to turn back." With those final words, the creature turned, its body gliding through the air like liquid mercury, moving towards the far end of the chamber. It stopped, then glanced back at them one last time. "Humanity's greatest leap is upon you," it said, its voice low and resonant. "Do not waste it." And with that, the creature disappeared into the shadows, leaving the crew standing in stunned silence, the weight of its words sinking deep into their minds. Talon's heart pounded in her chest as the chamber seemed to close in around her. They were no longer just explorers. They were players in a game far larger than they could comprehend, and the stakes were higher than they could ever imagine. The crew stood frozen in the chamber, the creature's words echoing in their minds like a distant storm. The cold air seemed to have thickened, as if the ship itself was closing in on them. Talon's pulse raced as the weight of the encounter settled heavily on her shoulders. The creature had spoken with such certainty, as if humanity's fate had already been decided. But what did it mean? What were the architects really planning? Talon turned slowly to face her team. Kess was the first to speak, her voice shaky, yet demanding. "Commander, what just happened? That thing, it wasn't human." Talon nodded, her thoughts swirling. "No, it wasn't. And that's exactly why we need to keep moving. We have to find out more, before this ship's transformation reaches us all." Captain Vance stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "You think the architects did this, altered the crew, the whole ship?" "I don't know, but it's the only explanation that makes sense." Talon's voice was steady but laced with a tension she couldn't hide. "We need answers, and we need them fast. That creature said the architects have been waiting for something. We need to figure out what that something is before it's too late." The air felt thick, oppressive. Every step Talon took seemed to reverberate through the hollow corridors of the Leviathan, each one a reminder of how far they were from home, both physically and in the unknown depths of their mission. They weren't just dealing with a lost ship anymore. They were dealing with something ancient, something incomprehensible, and it was just beginning to reveal itself. The team moved quickly, making their way toward the central core of the ship. The walls pulsed with that same strange energy, and the hum of the ship seemed to have grown louder, vibrating beneath their feet. There was no sign of the creature, no indication of where it had gone, but Talon could feel its presence lingering, like a shadow that refused to leave. They reached the heart of the Leviathan, a massive chamber filled with glowing blue panels that pulsed with an unnatural rhythm. It was here that the ship's power was centered, where its lifeblood seemed to flow. And it was here that Talon had a sinking feeling they would find the answers they so desperately sought. "What is this place?" Kess whispered, her voice barely audible as she gazed at the eerie energy that filled the chamber. Talon stepped forward, her eyes scanning the intricate machinery. It wasn't human. The design was too foreign, too perfect. The patterns seemed to shift and change as she looked at them, like they were alive, adapting in real time. She reached out, hesitating for just a moment, before placing her hand against one of the panels. Instantly, a jolt of energy shot through her, and her vision blurred for a second. A voice, soft yet powerful, filled her mind. "Humanity has always been at the center of our plans. We have watched you, shaped you. And now, you are ready. The architects have chosen. The time for awakening is at hand." Talon staggered back, her heart racing. The words were clear, but their meaning. What did it all mean? She blinked, trying to steady herself, but the vision faded as quickly as it had come. The hum of the ship grew louder, as if the walls themselves were responding to the message. "What the hell was that?" Vance asked, his voice filled with both fear and curiosity. Talon swallowed hard, turning to face the crew. The architects, she murmured, more to herself than anyone else. They've been guiding us all along, shaping us into something different. And now they're ready to bring us to the next step. But at what cost? She looked around the chamber, at the glowing panels that seemed to pulse with an eerie intelligence. Something big was coming. They weren't just on a ship anymore. They were standing at the threshold of an entirely new phase of existence. Talon's eyes hardened with determination. They had come this far, and they couldn't turn back now. We need to figure out what they want. We need to stop this before it's too late. But deep down, she couldn't shake the feeling that the real challenge wasn't finding out what the architects wanted. It was surviving whatever they had in mind. The atmosphere in the Leviathan had shifted. What was once a silent, foreboding space now thrummed with an almost oppressive energy. The walls glowed faintly, casting an eerie blue light across the crew's faces as they gathered in the central command room. They had seen it all now. Encounters with the strange being, cryptic messages from the ship itself, and their own bodies changing in ways they couldn't fully understand. But the final revelation loomed before them like a storm on the horizon, too large to ignore. Talon stood at the helm, her eyes scanning the data scrolling across the display. The ship's systems were still malfunctioning, but in a new way. They were no longer just erratic. They were directing the ship, pushing it toward a destination. The coordinates were fixed, locked into place. "Commander," Kess said, her voice tense, "the ship is moving. It's headed toward the core of the galaxy. It's as if it's being drawn in." Talon didn't need to ask for confirmation. She could feel it too, the strange pull, like gravity but unnatural, as if the Leviathan was answering a call it had been waiting for. The crew had no control anymore. The ship's systems were acting of their own accord. "This isn't right," Captain Vance muttered from behind her, his eyes narrowed in disbelief. "We're not supposed to be here. We were meant to explore, to discover, not this." But Talon knew it was too late for regrets. Whatever the architects had planned, whatever they had set in motion, they couldn't stop it now. The question wasn't whether they could change course. It was whether they could survive the consequences of what came next. "We need to decide what we're going to do," Talon said, her voice firm, but filled with a quiet, deadly certainty. "The ship has already made its choice, but we still have one chance to make our own. Do we continue down this path, following whatever fate the architects have set for us, or do we try to take control before it's too late?" The silence that followed felt heavy, suffocating. The crew exchanged looks. An unspoken understanding passed between them. There were no easy answers, no clear path forward, but Talon knew what needed to be done. They had to make a choice. Kess stepped forward, her expression hardening. "We're not just passengers on this ship anymore. We're part of it. Our bodies, our DNA, they're connected to it now. If we don't act, we'll become nothing more than puppets." Vance nodded grimly, his hand tightening around the console. "We either fight back or let the ship's transformation take us over. I'm not ready to give up everything we are, everything we could be, for this." Talon felt her heart race, her breath shallow. The weight of leadership had never felt heavier. "Then we fight," she said. "But we do it on our own terms." Her team rallied behind her, a shared resolve filling the air. They weren't going to let the architects dictate their fate. The Leviathan might have been their home, but humanity had always been about choice, about defying the odds, rewriting the rules. It was time to take a stand. As the ship's course continued to draw them closer to the core, Talon's grip on the command console tightened. The unknown stretched out before them, vast and terrifying. But one thing was clear. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about reclaiming their future. The final choice had been made. And whatever lay ahead, humanity would face it together.